right. Well, so let's get started. What I would like to discuss is about the review process for HTML and CSS, and kind of just the review process in general. You'll hopefully have experience of the review process from design, where you submit your prototype for peer review, and your peers give you suggestions on it. And then you'll also have experience with asking Benita, hopefully, for feedback, so that she can give you some suggestions. Um, what I would like to do is, if there is a brave soul out there who would like to share kind of a work in progress of where they are so far with their website, I'll happily do like an example review and just kind of go through the things that I'm looking for, and share that. I don't know if anyone fancies being that person. Get free feedback, and um, you can hopefully just kind of see the way that I approach it. Yay, great. Okay, cool. So,
Sorry, can
yeah,
you hear me now?
yeah, now I can hear you.
Alright, thank you. I'm so sorry. Sorry, guys. It looks like my power connector is. I have to just remove. Alright, you can proceed, MJ.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, cool. Oh, I'm so stoked that uh, people are sharing in the chat. So there's one, and I'll start work on that one now. Um, Sorry, let me. Share screen. Is that, can you describe me around with it? Great. So, um, site looks nice. Um, the hamburger menu sliding in from the left. That's cool. And the close. There we are. Cool. So the first thing I will test when I look at a website is the responsiveness of the website. So I'll go right click and inspect, and I'll turn. I'm using Firefox here. Some of you will be using Chrome. It's a similar process. I just prefer Firefox myself. I find the dev tools to be slightly more intuitive, but you'll find your way. Also, I'll go and select iPhone. I've kind of used the iPhone 11 as kind of like my base at 375 pixels wide. Um, so here we can see there's no horizontal scroll bar, so that's good. And if I expand it up, so that's looking good in terms of responsiveness. Let's look in the footer and see what's happening. So there, that collapses down into a single column. Great. So in terms of responsiveness, I think we're headed in the right direction. The one thing to look at is to make sure that this meta viewport tag is there. It's critical for your site to be responsive that you have this meta viewport tag. It makes sure that you can use media queries, and that the site scales correctly on your phone. Otherwise, you can be tricked. The browser can trick you into thinking your site is responsive when you test it um, on your website, but when you actually test it on a real phone, you see that it's not responsive. So it's always useful to test across a few devices, and also to test across a few different browsers. We don't expect you to carry support for old Internet Explorer browsers, but modern browsers like Chrome, Firefox should be working fine. Okay, so I've looked at the responsiveness. One thing that stands out as a comment is probably this text here. It probably took you quite a lot of effort to get with the stroke there, but I'd say it's a little bit hard to read personally. I can't read it that easily, so that would be one comment on that. We can see what does so here it tells me that the black color on that gray background isn't WCAG compliant, but with that orange background it is. With the stroke, I'd probably rather look to find another solution. They're just a little bit hard to read for me. If you remember from that book, Don't Make Me Think, by Steve Krug, you just don't want the user to ever go, what is that? And then like you kind of almost have to stop a little bit and just double check that. So that's one comment there. The title is Game Hub Home, like that. Not so sure about sign in. I'd say probably this is the home page, but maybe that makes sense. The next thing I'm looking for here is the meta description tag, which is very important for SEO. So that's the next thing I would want to look and see here, and currently there isn't a meta description, so I would want you to go add that, and it should be unique per page. So when you go to Google and you search front-end development cool tips, the title is what appears as the heading, and the meta description is what appears as the description. And so we want to have control of that, because we don't want Google to just randomly choose words. We don't want it to randomly choose words for us. We want to say exactly what we want that description to be, and to make it as enticing for users to come across to our websites. Okay, great. I'm glad to see there's a header. Now I'm just wanting to check. So here you've duplicated the navigation, it looks like, to be able to have a navigation. Oh, whoops, wrong one. A navigation on, or maybe these are two separate navigations. But it looks like, let me see, there's nav. Okay, and this is not placed in a nav element. I would suggest that you have one nav for your site. There's occasionally a reason to have two navs. What you want the nav to be is the principal way of navigating your website. So if you have multiple versions, for someone who can't see your website, it's hard to know which is the main way to navigate your website. What you would want is you would want to use an area label to be able to say kind of which is your primary navigation and which is not. An example of why you might need to have two navigation elements on your page would be if you have both an across the website navigation, and if you have navigation on that page. That could be an example of why you might want to have two navs, but having one is the way to go, and that seems to be what you've done here, which is, I'm glad to see that. So I'm not a big fan of seeing that. I realize, of course, we haven't covered JavaScript yet, but it would be my suggestion that students don't add on-click events into the HTML. So it's quite important at this stage that you see that there are three different languages of front-end development: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So it's really great that you're experimenting with JavaScript, but we want our CSS files to handle the styling, we want our HTML files to handle the content, and we want our JavaScript files to handle the interactivity. So when you're writing an on-click into the HTML, what you're doing is you're writing JavaScript in a place which is for content. So that's just one thing to note there. I don't think you need to use a paragraph tag around the anchor tags, because this home single word, PlayStation single word, contact single word, these aren't paragraphs. So a paragraph is a group of sentences that form a complete thought. So that would be a paragraph there. Whereas, say here, that is just a link. So you don't need to use the paragraph tag there. Great to see a class styling with active styling there. That's what I'd like to see. And then I'd be a little bit cautious of an overuse of sections. If I take your site here and I go W3 validator, and this is what I would expect you to do before you deliver, that you've gone to this validation service and you've gone and checked. It's going to give you some comments now about the sections. Just waiting for it to load. So there's you can remove the trailing slash. So it says here P is not allowed as a child element of label, so that's on line 15. You can see it tells you exactly where to look. So we go to line 15. Okay, it doesn't like that paragraph tag inside the label. Okay, looks like there's a duplicate ID. So on line 21 and line 16, you use the same ID, so that catches it for you. It doesn't want the input as the child of a UL. So definitely run it through here. Here you can see you get some warnings about your sections. Section lacks heading. I want to encourage use of semantic HTML, but for example, here, right, you've got this nav, and then you place a section, and then a UL. The section isn't actually adding any semantic value. It's not saying that this is a section. So like a section of a website, let's go to naraf.no. So a section is like a way of being able to break down the page. So there are probably two ways of being able to break up this page. One, we could say that this section here is our header, or we could equally say this section here is our header. I would probably look to include that in the header. It kind of introduces the page. So I would say that is our header there. I'm sure there would be disagreements between some of the teachers on that. And then this I would call a section. Probably that whole thing is one section. And then over here, so this is a great example of a section. So this here, that whole thing, that's one section there. It's got a heading. It's clearly identifiable as a thing on the website. So that's what I would look to use the section element on. I wouldn't then group these individually as sections, but rather I would collectively group all of that into the one section. I don't want to go too much longer because Abby has things that he's prepared and wants to go on. This is the sort of level of detail that I would want to give in my feedback to you. And what we want is you'll be assigned to a marker, and I'll email out either today or tomorrow who your markers are. And what we want is you to send your website to them and for them to look over your website. But before they do that, what would be great, let me pull up here. And let's go course assignment. What we're wanting is that you use this marking criteria to be able to test whether your website passes. So for example, right, the marking criteria here is responsive. The website is responsive across screen sizes, works on major browsers and across devices. I'm going to give that as a tick. I've tested the website and it is responsive, so I'm happy to say yes, that is completed. Okay, so the next thing here is bug-free, neat, and well-written code. So I've gone here and I've highlighted some of the things like a duplicated ID. So I can't actually tick this off yet until I've resolved the validation issues here. So that would be unticked. The appeal of the website and ease of navigation, I would give that, let me close that, I'd give this a tick on that, with the caveat of maybe just that text might just be a bit easier to read, but I'm happy to say that this is at the, like, if I'm just evaluating the homepage, this is heading in the right direction. And then, is it WCAG friendly? Okay, so I come here and I'll go and wave this page, and why is it not giving me any? Wave this page. Okay, it gives me 8 errors. Some issues on the form labels. Some of it will be some of it might be incorrect. Like, for example, if you're using the checkbox hack, it might not like you using the checkbox hack, but some of these are very important. Here's some alerts as well here talking about alt text. It can feel a little bit overwhelming at first, seeing all of these come up and these, but these are really good tools for being able to catch things that you didn't catch yourself. And then it's happy with a lot of those features, so that's great. Cool. So in terms of the process, what I would like is if you could go through this thing yourself. So let's say the website is finished and I'm satisfied with how it is. Then I come to my marking criteria and I go and make sure that I can tick off each of these things. So no inline styling, for example. So for this, the page has a unique title. It doesn't have a meta description, so I couldn't tick that one off the list. So then I go through and I work through all of those, and then I tick, and then I tick, and then I say that I've passed. Then what would be great is then you take your website and you share it on the peer feedback forum, and you go through other people's websites and you give them feedback on theirs. The way I've been describing it is kind of like the golden rule, like do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And in this case, give others the feedback that you yourself would like to get. So if you give someone feedback that just says, nice one, like that doesn't help them move their website forward. But if I've spent 15 minutes here and I have a few corrections to be able to give the student, that's going to be able to drive their website forward. So that's kind of what we're wanting, and especially what we're wanting to get you guys really good at is being able to read code. So you need to be able to read and see what's happening, and like the problem is that if you only look at your code, it all makes sense. But as soon as you start reading someone else's code, you can go, oh, I don't quite understand why it's like that. And you're going to develop what's called evaluative judgment, the ability to be able to know how a work is and how to move that work forward. In your job, as a real developer, you're going to read lots of other people's code and need to give them feedback on the code that they've written. So thanks very much for sharing this website, Runa. I hope I wasn't too harsh on it. It's looking really good, and I think this is a really stable version, and I'm very impressed by the responsiveness. So personally, it looks like you're on good track there, and hopefully using tools like the validator will just help pick up a few things as well. Okay, I'm just gonna show CodePen, and we can build a few things here while we wait, Abby, for you to get sorted there. So you just come back and let me know when you're ready. One thing that I would probably at this stage want you to be good at is some Flexbox and some CSS grids, and that's often something that students find a little bit difficult. So I'm going to go over that. I think I don't know if that's interesting. I think Abby, you wanted to talk about forms, so I'll leave that for you. But for now, I'll just go over some good old-fashioned Flexbox. Okay, so I'm gonna have a div, and let's say I want to have a list of products on my website. So I'm gonna have here class of products, and I'll have a div. You know what, let's make this more semantic. Let's call that a section. Okay, now inside of my section I will have a div, and that will be a class of product, and let's have here h2 best sellers, and underneath it I'm going to have my product, and I'll call my product this highly imaginative product 1 h3e. So I'm just writing this section here. I'm not writing my whole page. Otherwise I would want to make sure that I have an h1, but because I've now mentioned it, let's do that. And I'll have h1 product page. Okay, so Abby messages in the chat saying that his internet isn't stable, so hopefully you can get that sorted and then come join us, but for now I can continue. And what I'll do here is I'll have a paragraph, let's just say lorem ipsum, and we'll have let's have an image. Quickly grab one from Unsplash. Let's see, what do we get? Oh, we get a mountain. We're selling mountains, guys. And we will get an alt for that. And we'll say mountains at sunset. Okay, so we have our product. I'm going to write the HTML first, and then we'll worry about the CSS. So there's my first product. I'll actually also want to include a link here. A href equals say product.html and view more. Now, with me at this stage, flagging a problem that I often see, and that is students wanting their link to look like a button, and so writing button ahref like that. But these are two different things. So a button is for adding on-page JavaScript interactivity. So let's say you want the user to click add to cart, and then it like drops the cart down in the right hand side and adds the product to that cart. You're not moving to a different page, you're staying on the page you're on, but you want to be able to basically attach something to happen to your website. That's what you want a button for. If you're just moving a user to a different page, you want a link. A button can also be used to submit a form, is worth adding as well. But if you're just moving the user to a different page, you can use view more. You can use an anchor tag, and you style that view more or whatever you want to look like a button, which I'll show you in just a moment. Okay, so I have now one product. I'm just going to go ahead and add, let's say, 3 products. And we can work on making this responsive too. Okay, so the first thing I want to do here is I don't want to have such a wide image, So I'm going to go change the image to have a width of 100%. Okay, so that's already, now at least we don't have that horizontal scroll bar, but things aren't quite how we want them yet. What we want on a large screen is to have the 3 products next to each other, not 1, 2, 3. This is actually a worthwhile thing, just pointing out from a design perspective. You really don't want the user to not be able to see everything in the one viewport, or at least, let me put that in a better way. You don't want to have lots of scrolling where the user can't see what they're scrolling for. So if you have a list of products and there's lots of products and you're scrolling down, that's fine as long as there's enough in the view to make it worthwhile. Here, I'm just scrolling down an image. I've no idea if there's actually going to be a product that I am going to like. And this is the reality for the user, is that they don't want to have to spend time finding out if they want to stay on your website or not. So allowing them to get to where they want to go faster is very important. And the next thing, let's say, is the product. So I'm going to go with Flexbox to start. And I'll say display flex. So now I have the items in a row, which is much better. I do run into a problem here where your bestsellers is now kind of part of this list. Now I have 2 options. I could, unsemantically, just move the bestsellers up there. But it doesn't work that well to me because it's an H2 for this section. So that doesn't make sense to just move it out. So I'll keep it in there. Another option for me is to use a wrapper. So I could use class equals products wrapper. There's nothing magical about the name wrapper, but it just explains that this is going around something. So I can go and add that here. I just want to indent it now because I've placed it inside of something. So instead of saying the product should display flex, I can now say dot products dash wrapper to display flex, and now I get that where the 3 products are next to each other but the best sellers is out. That is one solution. The other, if I don't want to unnecessarily add HTML to my page, and ideally we don't want to be adding HTML purely for styling reasons, so let's go and find a way to avoid having to have a wrapper div there. Now bestseller should there. What I can do is I can target this h2, so I can say dot product h2. So the h2 inside of the products, the element with the products class, I can now set that to it is flex 100%. And then I need to set this to flex wrap. And now why isn't it working? Anyone can spot what I've done wrong here. Dot product flex 1. There we are. For reference, this is the shorthand for Flexbox. This first property sets the flex grow. This property sets the flex shrink. And this property sets the flex basis. So what it says is this element should grow to take up available space. That's why it gets 1. It shouldn't shrink. That's why it gets 0. And as a basis, as its starting point, it should take up 100% of the container, of its container. So now it's taking up 100% of the space. If we look and inspect here, let me zoom in. Okay, so there we can see you can see here Flex is applied, so we can even go ahead and click that, and would you look at that, Firefox for the win. Although I think this also is on Chrome, so but you can highlight it and it shows you the layout of your Flexbox, and you can see this now, this element here is now taking up that full width of its container. The last thing that I probably want to do on this is I want to add some gap. I don't like this running so close to each other, so I'm going to go here and I'll add a gap of 10 pixels. And that just creates a little bit of space between them. Final thing I'm going to do, I see Abby, hopefully your internet's back, and I'll just show the last thing here is just styling those view more links. So I'm going to say dot here. I'll quickly show something. This isn't going to work how I want it to probably. I'm going to try and add a background of, let's say, orange. What if we look at here, by default, console. By default, the color of the link is blue. So if I just add that blue, you'll see that the blue on the orange isn't WCAG compliant. And you'll actually find if you use orange, it's quite hard to get a color that is WCAG compliant. So I will try and do something else. I actually probably don't want to use products as the larger class. I want to rather use product because it's an anchor in the product, so it just makes it a bit clearer. Let's say I'll set the color to white, and as you can see here, it's again not going to be WCAG compliant. Very important to note here, let me zoom in again. Like, this is a great way of just being able to test if your site is WCAG compliant, is you go and do that. Another way of doing that is if you go to contrast checker. So let me get this color name number. Okay, I'll just make it slightly off. What you can do is you take your hexadecimal value, go here, background, and the foreground is white. FFF is white, and you can see here it fails every single level on the contrast checker. So I probably want to go for a darker color. So maybe if I go something like that, is that still not close though? And there we are. It's now AA compliant. We probably want to try and push that into AAA compliance, which would be something like that. And oh, we're still not quite there. Oh, this is a mission. And there we get it. The alternative option would be going something like that, and then having this be 00, which is black, and that is AAA compliant. So a little bit about accessibility, probably a little bit about Flexbox. Are there any questions on that? Anything you'd like to know or see? Drop it in the chat. And sorry, Abby. Okay. But I think what we can do is we can talk about responsive images and background images. So let's have a look here what we've built so far. So I'm using Flexbox. So as you can see, it scales with the page. I do have this problem though when I get to like there. That looks pretty gross to have 3 products like that. I don't want that. So what I can do is I'll use some media queries to change how things are. With CSS, you want to be able to work mobile first. So I'm going to go ahead and set this up from a mobile first perspective. So let's go here, and I will want the products, instead of flex 1, I actually want them to be flex 10, and if we remember, 100% is a way to be able to force it to be the full width. What I can also say is I can say that I want it to be a specific amount, so I could say 300 pixels, that it should start at least 300 pixels, but then I do run into some issues. You can see here it tells me there I'm at 272 pixels. Now most phones are kind of a minimum of 375 pixels wide these days, so we don't really have to worry about anything kind of at the 300 pixel level, but for now let's just set that to be 100%, the full width of its container. And then let's say at, what size is this? That's 440 pixels. Okay, I want it to change, so I'll say at media min width, and let's say 440 pixels. I actually want the dot product to be flex 10, so 300 pixels. I actually want, let's say, make that 200 pixels. So at 440 pixels wide, it now moves from being in a single column to now being in 2 columns, and I'll create another media query below that, and let's say at, oh, there we go, that's actually already what we want, because I'm using flex, the flex property. So it's scaling down and up. In terms of background images, so in this case I have a product, in this case a mountain, bizarrely, but I would want to tell the user about that product, so it probably makes sense that I use an HTML image so that the user gets told about it. The decision about whether you use a background image or an HTML image is basically down to, do I want to tell someone about this or not? So if a visually impaired person is trying to use the website, is it worth me telling them about this? And that's kind of for you to decide. I'll quickly get a, how do we go to Unsplash, grab another image. Okay, let's, this one, I'm using absolute file paths here because I don't want to, because I'm not working locally, I'm just working in CodePen. But when you're making your website, you'll probably have an images folder. Okay, so I'm going to use that picture for a heading for the product page. It's just going to be for decoration, so I'm going to say background URL, and it's set the background size to cover, and I'm going to set a min height here of 300 pixels. So here I have the image, and as you can see, as I scale down, doesn't quite do what I want. I could have this to be 100%, maybe that's better for what I want, and no, I do want cover, because I've set the min height. And you can set the background position left. Is the property left? Maybe center is better to try and keep our little, there's our dude in the middle now. Okay, now we're happy. Okay, so on smaller screen now, the background positions itself on the center. Properties like these you won't always find in our content, like, because there's so many different properties that you can apply to CSS, it will depend somewhat on your use case for them. And like in this exact moment, I couldn't quite remember how you set the property for background position, if it's on, like if I can just fling left, right, or center, and then I remembered, okay, I can just put on center. But if I couldn't remember that, what I would do is I would go here and I would go MDN. If I just had to, let's say this, right? I'm showing you guys how to Google. So if I write background position CSS, I get MDN. There's the top result, yay. And I get W3 schools. I wonder which one I should click. I'm going to go the one that says W3 because like W3 seems to be an internety name. But caution, alert, this is not our recommended websites for you to use. Some things they're good on. Unfortunately, largely they are not as well maintained. These guys are the ones that you want to look at, and they have highly updated, and here you can see they show you the different properties I could use to be able to set the position of the background. But MDN's your friend, and in the early stages of your development career, you'll probably have to be on MDN a fair amount. As you grow as a developer, you'll be on MDN every now and again. You're never going to be in a position where you've memorized MDN. You almost always have to go back and look. So don't think that we have it all memorized in our heads. What I'm trying to get across to students is that we're not trying to make you like memorize, parrot fashion, learn everything about making websites. What you need to be good at is being able to problem solve, and part of problem solving is knowing which resources to go and read and look at and remember where to go and find something. So I hope that you use MDN. It's really good. Going back to this, so now if I go and I scale that up, I can see it's responsive across the different viewports. Yeah, I don't know what more to say, but I hope that that's been helpful. It's not so zoomed in. Yeah. Unfortunately, I do have to wrap up there. I do only have 3 more minutes. Just to reiterate, I'm going to email you the I'm going to email or message you about which teacher you've been assigned to, and then if you can please, when your website is ready for review, if you can drop them a message and ask for the review. We ask that you ask for the review up to 5 days before the course assignments. So what we can't have is we can't have everyone come ask for a review on Friday afternoon, because if we got 100 students asking for a review on Friday afternoon, we wouldn't be able to do a very good and thorough review. So the responsibility is partly on you to ask with enough time. So we say you can ask for reviews up to the Tuesday before the delivery. I think yours is the 13th of November. So Tuesday the 8th. So if you can get your review, message your tutor by Tuesday the 8th, then you'll get a review. And also please do use the reviews in the on the forum, and make sure you give other people good reviews. As I say, the more useful your review, the more helpful it is for everyone else.